little story began a couple of weeks ago when my boss got carried away about a little town down in the Ozark Mountains in Arkansas and a resort hotel that sounded like the last word in vacation spots. So he sent for me. Oh, excuse me. I'm Joe. I'm a newspaper photographer. The upshot of it was, the boss wants me to go down and check on things and do a complete story picture for the paper. The way he put it, this town of Eureka Springs and the Crescent Hotel sounds like the Grand Canyon, San Francisco, Utopia, all rolled into one. Well, I must admit that it sounded pretty good to me, too, so it wasn't very long before I was ready to take off on my Ozark assignment, loaded with camera gear and the best of intentions. My pleasant flight ended at Fayetteville in the mountains of northwest Arkansas. That's the home of the University of Arkansas and its famous Razorback football team. As I got off the plane, the airport manager was there to tell me that the bus from the Crescent Hotel was waiting to take me over to the hotel. It seems that quite a large number of their guests are coming by plane these days. So in just minutes, I was in the Crescent bus, looking forward eagerly to what promised to be one of my very best assignments. This was a part of the country I had often heard about, but had never seen. To Eureka Springs was certainly up to expectations. I had no idea the Ozarks were so beautiful. This mountain range extends southwestward from way down in Missouri to Arkansas and Oklahoma. It's called the Ozark Plateau, and some of the mountains reach to an altitude of 2,800 feet. Eureka Springs is one of the most scenic areas of the mountains and has an altitude of nearly 2,000 feet. Not too high, but high enough for comfortable summers. The Crescent Hotel is visible from miles away. The trip was over all too soon. By this time, I was convinced that the boss had sure been on the right track. When I got to the Crescent Hotel and looked it over, I decided it was certainly looking mighty promising. Mighty, mighty promising indeed. The hotel, by the way, is on West Mountain overlooking the town and has been famous for years as the best and most complete resort in the Ozarks. Well, a couple of days slipped by before I knew it, and I figured the boss would be looking for some word from me. I hadn't gotten any pictures yet, but I wanted to tell him about this interesting sightseeing trip we'd had. It's part of the Crescent plan for keeping the guests entertained. They drove us all around Eureka Springs, and I can see why they called it the Crazy Quilt Town and the Stairstep Town. Some of the houses are accessible only by a bridge. I can't see how some of them keep from sliding off the mountainsides. The town seems to have been literally carved out of rock. Back in the 1880s, when it was settled, it was covered by dense forests, and so rugged that not even the Indians lived here. They came only to hunt. The town is built in several levels. Steps have been cleverly built into the rocky slopes to enable the residents to get from one street to another. And there are over 100 miles of retaining walls, and there's no place level enough for a boy to play baseball. Well, it's like I told the boss. I was sort of planning the picture coverage, but in the meantime, I was discovering a lot of interesting things about the Crescent, such as the swell swimming pool out on the east lawn with its gorgeous natural setting. And the setting isn't all as gorgeous either. I soon got the idea I wasn't going to be too lonesome. On the hill just below the Crescent Hotel is the famous church you enter through the steeple, featured many times by Ripley in his Believe It or Nots about Eureka Springs. Actually, St. Elizabeth's is not really entered through the steeple. You go through the bell tower to get to the church proper, a whole story below. And the red tile roof and copper dome are most outstanding. This little church has had a lot of publicity, and it's a great attraction for the tourists. One of the interesting things about the church, aside from its unique construction, is the collection of beautiful statuary lining the entire walkway from the bell tower to the entrance of the church down below. The 14 stations of the cross are made of pure white Carrara marble, brought from Italy a few years ago by a former priest of St. Elizabeth's. Most of them are memorials purchased and presented by the local church members. On the edge of the grounds overlooking the town below is the shrine of Our Lady of Fatima. By this time, I was beginning to enjoy myself thoroughly, but my conscience is beginning to bother me. So I got a note off to the boss and promised him that I will surely get some pictures tomorrow. Right now, there are more interesting things to do. Interesting things such as exploring the town of Eureka Springs and finding out there are 63 springs here, all piped and accessible so people can fill their water bottles with this clear, cold, and pure water. It's said to have curative properties. Won't you have some? Not far from town is the beautiful and bottomless Blue Spring with a flow of 38 million gallons a day. And it's always blue. One of my favorite places is the oddly named Hog Skull Hollow, where scads of water tumble through deep potholes in Clifty Creek. What a place for some pictures. This would make a good picture too. Natural Bridge, not far from town. Close to it and over a short walk through the woods is another, believe it or not, Pivot Rock, 75 feet across the top and an 18-inch base. Speaking of woods, there's a whale of a lot of good timber in these woods too. We came across a little portable sawmill engaged in cutting railroad ties of oak. In addition to many kinds of oak, there's a wealth of walnut, sassafras, cherry, and all kinds of pine. Lumbering is just about the only industry Eureka Springs has, outside of the tourist business, that is. And the tourists really go for these nice baskets they make here, especially the ones shown here, made painstakingly by hand out of split hickory. And they're practically indestructible. Another thing the visitors enjoy is horseback riding and the picturesque trails around here, especially out at Lake Lucerne, just a couple of miles from town. Because of the mild winters they have here, swimming can be enjoyed for 6 or 7 months a year in the numerous lakes near town. Lake Leatherwood, only 4 miles out, is a great favorite too. You might almost say that Eureka Springs is surrounded by lakes. There are 6 of them within a few miles, so this is a paradise for all water sport enthusiasts. Beaver Dam is the newest one here, just recently having been completed by the U.S. Corps of Engineers for the purpose of flood prevention in the eastern part of the state. These dams are multi-purpose, too. Here at Beaver Dam, for instance, 172,000 kilowatt hours of electric power are generated. Beaver Lake is 70 miles long and has a shoreline of 500 miles. Boat docks on both Beaver and Table Rock lakes are well equipped to take care of all kinds of watercraft. Table Rock Lake is even larger than Beaver, having an 800-mile shoreline and being about 90 miles long. The dam creating this lake is up in Missouri near Branson. Lakes are stocked with fish, so the fishing is always good. Looks like fun, too, with a pretty little blonde along for company. Here's proof they really do catch some good ones. Aren't they beauties? Well, by this time, the boss is getting a little hot under the collar, and I thought I'd better get some stuff off to him before he sends me any more of those nasty telegrams. So loaded with cameras, films, and good intentions, I set out to do some serious photographic work. The gang was just leaving for a hayride and wanted me to go, so, well, I figured I could get the pictures tomorrow just as well. Runs these trips regularly as part of the entertainment for their guests on what they call their package vacation plan. The interesting sightseeing trips are included too. It makes it nice for folks who come by plane, train, or bus. They really get to see a lot of the country. The hayride goes north toward White River on a very scenic route. Rolling along slowly gives you a chance to appreciate the beauty of the countryside. At the little community of Beaver, we cross the river and go over to the picnic area for our supper. There we built a real fire, and in no time at all, it was burning just right to cook our main course. How long it's been since I did anything like this. Of course, when we did it, when I was a kid, we cut sticks and jabbed the pointed end into the hot dogs and roasted them ourselves. I remember one end was always burned to a crisp, and the other end was cold and raw. And half the time the whole thing would drop into the fire. Nothing ever tasted so good. What with the fresh, clean air and the good appetite that my little friend here seems to have. Dessert is a do-it-yourself affair, and if you don't burn them to a crisp, toasted marshmallows can't be beat. Well, of course, it was too late when we got back to take any pictures, but I found something to do. The hotel has indoor recreation, too, including a nice bowling alley. And later on, some square dancing. This morning I was enjoying myself on the porch attending to some correspondence when the recreation director asked me if I'd like to take a little trip to see something really special. This spot on Magnetic Mountain has been chosen for the site of something unique in all of the North American continent. A gigantic statue of Christ called the Christ of the Ozarks. It's the only one of its kind. I had heard about it, and I was very thrilled to actually see it up close. It's 7 stories high and faces west, looking out over the town of Eureka Springs. The sculptor was Emmett Sullivan, considered the finest in the world for a project of this kind. In the foundation alone, there are 320 tons of concrete and steel, and the statue can resist 500-mile-an-hour winds. It's built to last forever. There's another inspiration nearby, too, Inspiration Point, where you can see the White River in a U-turn at your feet nearly 1,000 feet down. White River is well known for its float trips. You just meander down the river, and at the end of the trip, they meet you and bring you back to the hotel. Some fellows camp out overnight along the gravel bar and make a longer trip of it. This way they can get at the poor, unsuspecting fish before they get their eyes open, I guess. In most cases, though, they just make a one-day trip of it. But in any case, it's a wonderful experience. With the advent of so many dams on the river now, however, these trips are being somewhat curtailed. By now, the boss is really frothing at the mouth for those pictures, so I thought I'd better let him know they'd be along pretty soon. This was a pretty big assignment to give just one lone photographer, so I told him I was getting an assistant to help me. Of course, I didn't tell him quite all the facts. Facts such as said assistant had red hair and was pretty as the flowers and had a figure like a model. I just didn't think he'd be particularly interested in all the details. So now, with such a helper, I should be able to get a little work done. And I got off to a fine start. I took picture number 1. Somehow, though, I got a little sidetracked after that. To stroll through the hotel grounds in the evening before dinner. The Crescent has about 25 acres of park and woods, and there are some nice places to sit and commune with nature. Speaking of dinner, though, I must tell the gang at the office about the fabulous food they have here at the Crescent Hotel. Specialty is the Serve Yourself salad cart, where you have a tempting array of crisp, fresh vegetables to choose from. They all look so good, it's hard to make a selection. The blue cheese dressing was the best you've ever tasted. Another Crescent specialty is home-baked bread, made right in their own kitchen and served still oven warm. Man, you never tasted anything so delicious. One of my favorites is the fried chicken, the real southern fried chicken you hear about but never get. Here you get it. Herbie was sort of partial to the trout. She said it was the best trout she'd ever tasted. In fact, everything was the best yet. After dinner, the Crescent often runs movies for the guests. They show interesting travelogues sometimes, and the folks really like them. My favorite, though, was a film about the town of Eureka Springs, which showed, among other things, what goes on in October during the celebrated annual Ozark Folk Festival. Everybody in town dresses up in some sort of pioneer or early days costume during Folk Festival week. It's usually the third week in October. There's an air of excited expectation, and everyone enters wholeheartedly into the spirit of the event. Everyone looks forward to the big parade, which takes place on Thursday afternoon of festival week. It's led off by the mayor of Eureka Springs and his flag bearers and members of the celebrated Northwest Arkansas Cavalcade of Riders. Riders come from far and wide to cover this interesting affair. Spring Street is lined with visitors from all over the country, and the town is always filled to capacity. Weeks, even months of planning and hard work go into the creation of some of the interesting floats. And of course, there's always a festival queen seated proudly atop a convertible. Spectators got a bit of attention too. He really wasn't growing the whiskers for the festival though. He wears them all the time. This festival idea took shape about 1947 when a group of local people decided that some of the picturesque and old folk ways should be preserved. They didn't want the pioneer tradition of their forefathers to become completely lost in progress. At Folk Festival time, these traditions are faithfully revived. I recognize the Crescent Hotel's hay wagon in the procession, loaded with some of the guests dressed for the occasion. And the Crescent usually has a prize-winning float in the parade, too. It's really amazing how the people of Eureka Springs work to make this parade so very interesting. I've seen a lot of parades in my time, but this was more fun than any of them. Irby and I decided we would be on hand in person for the Folk Festival next year. Then the film went on to show how this part of the country looks in the spring. Nature provides the show then, when the mountainsides are white with the blossoms of the dogwood trees. I had never heard the legend of the dogwood before. It goes something like this. The dogwood was once a tall, straight tree in the Holy Land, and its strong, hard wood was chosen to fashion the cross on which Jesus was to be crucified. This greatly grieved the tree, and in his great compassion, Jesus said that henceforth the four petals would be in the shape of a cross, too long and too short, and the tips would be tinged with red as with blood. In the center would be a crown of thorns, and never again would the tree be tall and straight enough to be used for such a cruel purpose, but short and twisted, and so it is to this day. We really couldn't decide which was the prettiest, spring or fall. Fall here must be quite special too. The film showed some of the beautiful autumn coloring when the hillsides are brilliant in red and gold and orange. Visitors come from all over just to see this flaming fall review, as they call it. Yes, sir, we sure did enjoy those pictures. To make a long story short, I wrote the boss this morning and told him he would have his picture soon because as I took a walk, I made a discovery. When I saw that for rent sign, something clicked. A light dawned, and I had a wonderful idea. I'm going to move here and open a photo shop. This Ozark assignment will be permanent.